Right, so in a sensational development, an ex-US Army colonel has revealed that as many as 70 Israeli soldiers, along with American and British mercenaries, have been killed by Yemen's Ansarullah fighters, also known as Houthis. I'm not saying this. This is the claim made by a veteran ex-army, ex-US colonel. Now, if this claim is true, then it's a huge blow to the Zionists from Israel, America, and the United Kingdom. Now, the colonel or ex-colonel who has made this claim, his name is Colonel Douglas Macgregor. He told the Judging Freedom podcast, which is a very popular podcast from America, that he was reliably told, his words, reliably told that 70 so-called Israeli commandos, special operation types, along with a number of American and British mercenaries, had infiltrated into Yemen secretly. What Colonel Macgregor said that he doesn't know the breakdown of Israelis, Americans and British, but they were mostly Israeli soldiers. According to the retired American colonel, they were constantly tracked after they infiltrated. They successfully infiltrated into Yemen. They didn't realize that they were being constantly tracked by a Russian satellite from the moment they entered Yemen. They had no idea. So they successfully entered Yemen without realizing that their movement is being tracked by a satellite, a Russian satellite. Now what Russians did, they alerted Iranians about this, and Iranians wasted no time in informing the Ansarullah fighters in Yemen. Now what do Houthis do after this? That's interesting according to Colonel. Houthis set up an ambush and killed all 70 of them.
But I am reliably told that roughly 70 Israeli so-called commandos or special forces, special operations force types, along with some number of Americans, the total number was 70. How many were Israeli and how many were American mercenaries that were joined in this operation? I don't know what the exact breakdown was, but it was obviously mostly Israeli. And they infiltrated successfully into Yemen, but they were tracked from the moment they infiltrated by overhead satellites, presumably Russian. And the Russians provided this information to the Iranians, who immediately telegraphed it to the Houthis. And whatever you say about the Houthis is that they're tough hombres on the battlefield. They set up an ambush and they killed all of them. And there is footage of the dead. And I haven't had a chance to examine it carefully, but clearly most of it's Israeli, but there are indisputably some American mercenaries there. There may be some Brits mixed into it who are also employees of the same contract firm.
Now, the story has not been reported by any mainstream media. If what the retired American colonel is saying is true, then it explains why you haven't seen this news anywhere in the mainstream media. Colonel Macgregor's video, however, has gone viral on social media. Israel has not reacted to this story and the claims made by the American colonel. However, there is no denying the truth that Houthis have been giving headache to Israel and its backers, namely the UK and the USA. You may remember the US and the UK had to form a coalition to bomb Yemen as part of their so-called Operation Prosperity Guardian earlier this year. You may also remember Rishi Sunak coming to British Parliament and informing that these attacks were a part of the alliance's effort to degrade the Houthis' military capabilities. Sunak's words when he was the Prime Minister, not mine.
I'd like to update the House on the action that we took on Thursday night against Houthi military targets in Yemen. Since the 19th of November, Iran-backed Houthis have launched over 25 illegal and unacceptable attacks on commercial shipping in the Red Sea. And on the 9th of January, they mounted a direct attack against British and American warships. They fired on our ships and our sailors. It was the biggest attack on the Royal Navy for decades. And so we acted. We did so in self-defense, consistent with the UN Charter, and to uphold freedom of navigation, as Britain has always done. Alongside the United States, with support from Australia, Bahrain, Canada, and the Netherlands, we ordered the RAF to strike 2 Houthi military facilities in Yemen. I want to be clear that these were limited strikes. They were carefully targeted at launch sites for drones and ballistic missiles to degrade the Houthis' capacity to make further attacks on international shipping. I can tell the House today that our initial assessment is that all 13 planned targets were destroyed. At the drone and cruise missile base in Barney, 9 buildings were successfully hit. A further 3 buildings were hit at Abs airfield, along with a cruise missile launcher caught in the open. We have seen no evidence thus far of civilian casualties, which we took great care to avoid. I know the whole House will join me in paying tribute to the incredible bravery and professionalism of all our servicemen and women. The need to maximise the security and effectiveness of the operation meant that it was not possible to bring this matter to the House in advance. But we took care to brief members before the strikes took place, including you, of course, Mr. Speaker, and the Leader of the Opposition.
But did they achieve in their objective? No. Because even Israeli ambassador in the Biden administration, and I'm talking about Anthony Blinken, had to acknowledge the power of Houthis when he showed his desperation to end the conflict in the Red Sea.
None of the main actors actually want a war. Israel doesn't want a war, although they may well be prepared to engage in one if necessary from their perspective to protect their interests, but they don't want one. I don't believe Hezbollah actually wants a war. Lebanon certainly doesn't want a war because it would be the leading victim in such a war. And I don't believe that Iran wants a war, in part because it wants to make sure that Hezbollah is not destroyed and that it can hold on to Hezbollah as a card if it needs it, if it ever gets into a direct conflict with Israel. So on the one hand, no one actually wants a war. On the other hand, you have forces, momentum, that may be leading in that direction, and which we are determined to try to arrest. You have, as you said, Suzanne, 60,000 or so Israelis who've been forced from their homes in northern Israel. Israel has effectively lost sovereignty in the northern quadrant of its country because people don't feel safe to go to their homes. You have many Lebanese in southern Lebanon who've also been chased from their homes. And absent doing something about the insecurity, people won't have the confidence to go back. And that requires 2 things. It requires, first and foremost, of course, stopping the firing across the border that's endangering people. But it also requires an agreement, reached through diplomacy, to try to deal with some of the elements that are causing this ongoing insecurity, including making sure that forces, for example, are pulled back so that they can't endanger people every single day and that people have the confidence to proceed. Here again, the United States has been deeply engaged in trying to advance this diplomacy, but it also underscores why a ceasefire in Gaza is so critical. Hezbollah, of course, has tied what it's doing to the situation in Gaza and has said that if there's a ceasefire in Gaza, it will stop firing into Israel. Now, it shouldn't be firing to begin with. It's wrong in and of itself, but it's also a reality. So it only underscores why getting that ceasefire could also be critical to further enabling the diplomacy to try to create conditions in which the diplomacy can really resolve this problem, get people back to their homes in Israel, in southern Lebanon, and have something that's more enduring in terms of keeping things calm. By the way, Red Sea, the Houthis, same thing. Iranian-aligned militia groups. So much of this is tied to Gaza.
In another example of Houthis' power, the CEO of Israel's Eilat port, Gideon Goldberg, had revealed how this key Israeli port was on the brink of bankruptcy as he sought urgent bailout package from the Israeli government. This was largely attributed to the sustained attacks from the Houthis. And these attacks had made this particular port virtually unworkable. Let's see if Israelis and their Western backers finally react to what Colonel Macgregor has to say. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do so, because that's one of the many ways you can support independent journalism. God bless you all.